Now, what is the U.S. CPA exam? What I want to talk about today are the 4 parts of the exam content and format, how to apply for the exam, and finally, how to get your CPA exam certificate. As you'll see on this exam, there are 4 parts to the exam, and I like to make sure people realize it is not an IQ test, it is a test of discipline. If you study, you will pass. It'll take 300+ hours of prep time, but that's what our job is, to take the difficult material, put it in perspective, help you get through the exam. The 4 parts to the CPA exam consist of auditing, financial accounting and reporting, regulation, and BEC, called Business Environment and Concepts. The first part is the audit exam, and the audit exam includes all these different parts of planning the audit, internal control, substantive testing, obtaining sufficient, appropriate audit evidence, audit reports, also looking at things like SSARS, Statements on Standards for Accounting and Review Services, reviews, compilations, other special areas like governmental, and then finally IT, information technology. So in auditing, those are some of the things they're looking at. When I worked at Deloitte, this is a lot of the stuff that is on the exam. So for example, one of the things that's heavily tested is audit reports. So at the very end of the audit, your job, should you decide to accept it, is to give an opinion on the client's financial statements. So what does the audit report say? In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above presents fairly in all material respects the financial position of EXCO as of 12/31/X1, the results of its operations, in conformity with United States principles, right? Generally accepted accounting principles, generally accepted in the United States. Now, that is the audit report. I had a lot of time when I was single, right, memorizing the audit opinion, but that's the audit opinion. That's a really important part of the audit exam. Financial accounting and reporting includes a whole bunch of areas. It includes your intermediate part 1, intermediate part 2, advanced accounting, governmental accounting, nonprofit organizations, all of that squeezed into a 4-hour exam. So auditing is a 4-hour exam. Financial accounting, called FAR, is also a 4-hour exam. So that includes inventory, lower of cost or market, accounts receivable, percentage of credit sales, aging of AR, net realizable value. It includes pensions, leases, bonds, deferred taxes, contingent liabilities, consolidations, foreign currency translations, transactions, deals with things like derivatives. Also, nonprofit, governmental accounting as well, are about 8 to 12% each. Regulation is tax and law. So tax, law, and actually professional responsibilities. So it's about, let's say, 60% tax, 20% business law, roughly 20% professional responsibilities and ethics. With the tax portion, that's going to be your 1040, your Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule C, Schedule D, Schedule E, even Schedule F has shown up recently. What is Schedule F, you ask? Farm income. Guess what? I worked at Deloitte for many, many years in downtown LA. How many farms do you think I audited? Nada, right? However, it still shows up on the exam. You have corporate tax, 1120, 1120 S Corps, 1065 partnerships, 6252 installment sales, 1031 like-kind exchanges, and so on. A lot of information on property. Is it an ordinary asset, a 1231 asset? Is it a capital asset? How is it accounted for? Ordinary income, capital gains, losses, and so forth. So that is the tax portion. Then you've got your business law, which is common law contracts, sales of goods contracts, negotiable instruments, bankruptcy, suretyship, agency. So all of that is about 20%. And then you have professional responsibility and ethics, where we go into a lot of detail about dealing with the ethical standards, the code of conduct, and so forth. So that is your 3-hour regulation exam. And then finally, BEC, Business Environment and Concepts. This is a 3-hour exam. This is a part that didn't even exist many moons ago when I sat for the exam, way back when we had a rock and chisel and so on. But it includes economics, both micro and macroeconomics. So microeconomics, supply, demand, decision makers. And then we're looking at macroeconomics, the overall economy, GNP, GDP, gross domestic product, business cycles, and so forth. Inflation. Also, we're looking at employment, unemployment, structural, cyclical, frictional, and so forth. All of that is part of economics on the BEC exam. We also have financial management, IT, information technology, decision making, corporate governance. Corporate governance is an area that they added because of the Enron, Arthur Andersen situation. They want us as CPAs to have a better understanding of what should be going on. Dodd-Frank Act, the Jobs Act. So all of that is part of that. Another area in BEC some of us are excited about. Remember cost managerial? It's back. Now what does that mean? It's back. What it means is cost managerial, that would be like variance analysis, direct materials, direct labor, factory overhead, spending efficiency, volume variance analysis, and so forth. So those are the 4 parts. That is how your 14-hour fun-filled adventure is set up. Once you pass a part, you keep that part for the next 18 months, which is a rolling 18 months, which we'll talk about a little bit later. As far as, again, the exam content, you'll see here in more detail a little bit more about the actual content specification outlines. That gets adjusted sometimes every year, periodically every few years, but it goes into a little bit more detail. For example, in auditing, how is that 16 to 20% made up? The other 16 to 20%. For example, in regulation, when we talk about 60-64% tax, how is that 60% broken up within that area? Now, for auditing, for example, they brought in the Audit Clarity Project. What they try to do is they realize, you know what, it wasn't quite clear enough, so now instead of the AU standards, they use AUC, the Auditing Clarity Standards. So that meant as of 2014, they got rid of the AUs and only started testing the AUC standards. And basically what we did is we came out and we said, you know, in auditing, it's not really clear when something is recommended, you should do it, or when it is a required. So that's what they talked about. And that's what the clarity standards were set up to do, to kind of make it clear as far as preparing and auditing when something is required or when something is recommended. Now, as far as the 4 parts, you'll see here that we've got FAR, Audit, and Reg. Those are about 60% multiple choice and 40% what we call Task-Based Simulations, or TBS. With BEC, it's about 85% multiple choice and 15% written communication, or essays. So, for example, in FAR and Audit, you've got 60% multiple choice. You'll have about 90 questions in total, 30, 30, 30. You'll also have these task-based simulations, which could be, for example, maybe with auditing, maybe an audit report where they want you to go through and talk about, hey, what kind of opinion would you give? What would the report modification look like? Maybe it's in financial accounting. They're asking you about change in accounting principle, change in estimate, change in reporting entity, correction of an error. What is it? How is it treated? Retroactive, retrospective, prospective, and so forth. Maybe in an area like tax, it could be filling in or dragging and dropping a tax form. So there are a variety of ways that these task-based simulations could be tested. You'll see here, for example, with Audit, FAR, and Reg, you'll see you've got 3 testlets, and then you've got these task-based simulations. So testlet 1, testlet 2, testlet 3. Testlet 1, for example, for both Audit and for FAR, have 30 multiple choice. Now, 30 multiple choice. You've got 4 hours for 30, 30, 30, and then 7 problems, 7 task-based problems. To keep on target, and that's one of the things we have to work with you on, is good time management, because you want to make sure you have adequate time to get through all the multiple choice and still have time to deal with the 7 task-based simulations. So we recommend generally about 1.5 minutes per question. That means for financial accounting reporting, or FAR, you've got 1.5 minutes to jump from leases, pensions, bonds, deferred taxes, consolidations, governmental accounting. Ooh, let's throw in a nonprofit. Let's come back over to consolidations. And so forth. So therefore, the preparation is imperative so that your brain can quickly jump. On the multiple choice, you generally have 4 choices, and you're bubbling it in, and then you're going on to the next question. So you've got 30, then 30, then 30. You'll see that group of 90 is worth about 60% of your score. And then you've got those 7 task-based simulations, which make up about 40% of your score. Now, what that says is, with the task-based, there are 7 in Audit, 7 in FAR. Of the 7, 1 is pre-tested, not graded. Also, at least one of those will also be a research question, which most students don't have too much trouble with, but we'll give you software so you can practice that so you're comfortable with the research. The other parts are going to be things like fill in the blank, drag and drop. It could be preparing part of a statement of cash flows, maybe doing the direct method, maybe operating versus investing versus financing activities, and so forth. So you'll see here you've got 30 multiple choice. Within the 30, you can go back and forth and forth and back. When you're ready, boom, you go to the next 30. When you're ready, boom, go to the next. But you can never go back. right? It's like a bad relationship. Once you leave it, don't ever go back. So you do the first 30, then it says, hey, do you want to take a break? You never want to take a break. Why not? Because time is of the essence. You want to make sure you don't run out of time. And what happens when you log in, there is, and something that they've added lately is there's 3 screens, and some people were running out of time. They were timing out during the screens. So what they did is they added the countdown clock on the screens, so you've got about 10 minutes to get through the first 3 screens. You just, I agree, I agree, I agree, boom, and that launches the exam. Then you have a countdown clock for, let's say, 4 hours where you're doing it. So you can kind of feel your heart racing. 4 hours, 3:59, 3:58, 3:57. You say, oh my gosh, I should have started studying sooner. So you can kind of feel your heart racing. But again, if you keep to our schedule, which is about 1.5 minutes per question, about 45 minutes for the first group, first testlet, 45 for the next, 45 for the next, and then about 15 minutes for each of the task-based simulations, you should be fine. So with Audit and FAR, 30, 30, 30, 7 problems. Because regulation is only 3 hours, whereas Audit and FAR are 4 hours, therefore what you're going to do is have 24, not 30. So 24 questions, 24 questions, 24 questions, and you need to get those done in about 30 minutes each. And then instead of 7, you'll have 6 task-based simulations. Of the 6, 1 is again not graded, pre-tested, and at least 1 will be on research. You'll see here with BEC, Business, Environment, and Concepts, you'll have 24, 24, 24, because it's also a 3-hour exam. But then you'll have 3 written communications. Now, you've got 24, and those are questions in all the different areas: economics, financial management, IT, cost accounting, managerial, then the next 24, and so on. One of the things I want to mention for all the exams, the first group of 24 or 30 are moderate level of difficulty. If you do well, they get more difficult. So that means you could have moderate, difficult, difficult, moderate, moderate, difficult, moderate, difficult, moderate, and so on. So as you're taking the exam, if the questions are getting more difficult, that's good. Okay, if they're getting easier, you're probably still doing bad, you know. But the point is, they're generally going to get more difficult. It's not like the GMAT or GRE where every question is harder or easier. Here it's a group of 30, boom, group of 30, boom, group of 30. Or in the case of Reg and BEC, 24, 24, 24. Back to BEC, you'll notice instead of 6 or 7 task-based problems, you have what? 3 written communications, 3 essays. These are usually not too difficult for our students. We cover them in class, but with written communication, what they're looking for is it clear, concise, complete, proper use of English, right? They want to make sure it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. They're not looking that it's correct, they're looking that it's relevant. Is it on topic? Is it grammatically correct? It's kind of like taking a Word document and you're typing, and if you get the red squiggly, what's it mean? You can't spell. If you get the green squiggly, what's it mean? It means your grammar ain't so good. That's really what they're looking for. So that's one of the things that, again, we'll go over in class. You'll notice of the 3, 2 are graded, 1 is not graded, 1 is just considered pre-tested. So here you'll see with the multiple choice, you've got to get 90 in Audit, 90 in FAR, 72 in Reg, 72 in BEC. So here's a typical question. At the top of the page, it has a calculator, and the calculator, I'll show you a picture of that in a few minutes. Then you've got your different choices, and at the bottom of the page, you can mark for review. That means you flag it. These are the kinds of questions, and there's going to be some questions you look at and you go, boom, I know that, it's C. You're going to look at some questions and go, wow, I'm never going to understand that the rest of my life on this earth. And you just mark something, move on. It's the questions kind of in the middle where you go, if I interpret it this way, it's A. If I interpret it that way, it's C. I think it's C. Let me mark it. I'll come back to it later. That means that while you're doing those 30 or 24, before you leave that testlet, you need to go back to the ones you flagged. You put your cursor, your mouse over it, you put the pointer over it, and the question pops up at the bottom so you can see it again. Oh, that's right, let me go back. I've had some time to think about it. Let me calm down. Now let me go ahead and answer that question. So you'll see that as far as being able to flag some of the questions. Obviously, you're not going to have time to flag them all right? But again, it's the ones that are kind of right in that gray area where if I calm down a little and I had a little more time, I'd feel comfortable answering that question. As far as the TBS, task-based simulations, as you'll see, it could be like a tax problem. Here's a partnership where you have to drag and drop the amounts in. Some of them could be, for example, like a financial question where you click on it, it opens a box, and it asks you to put in the description or the accounting treatment. How would you do it? As I said, retrospective, retroactive, prospective, currently and prospectively, and so on. So you're filling that in. You could be typing in numbers, but usually they'll give you some choices, because again, they want to make it easier to grade so that they can timely release the scores so people can get those scores on a regular basis. As far as the written communication, you'll have a similar question where it goes through, asks you some information, and then what you're going to do is you're going to start to type in that answer. It does now have a spell check, so that's good, but it doesn't have a grammar check. So make sure that you're putting it in clean, clear English. It'll say no bullet points, no charts, no graphs, no abbreviations. Why not? Because it's machine graded. In other words, the machine doesn't know how to read a chart or a graph or a bullet point. So what it says is, again, clear, concise, complete, use of standard English, make sure it's relevant, make sure it's on topic. So you're using the key words that relate to that topic that they've asked you about. As you're going through it, it has, you'll see, graded by computer. So if your score is close, 74, 75, 76, then they will again hand grade it to make sure that it's okay. Again, no bullets, multiple paragraphs, an intro, a body, and then a closing. Stay on topic. There's 2 of these. Now there's 3 questions, but only 2 of them are graded. Of course, you never know which of the 2 are going to be graded. Probably not the one that you really felt comfortable with. As far as time strategy, and as I mentioned, time is of the essence. So what that means is part of what we have to do at Roger CPA Review is not only teach you the material, and I know we call it a review course, but believe me, there's a lot of stuff you may have never seen in school. I've yet to meet an intermediate accounting instructor who finished the entire book, right? They're always like, we're going to finish the entire book this semester. And you're like, ugh. And then all the way through they go, well, we don't have time for the last 4 chapters on foreign currency remeasurement and translation. And you're like, phew, thank goodness, I'll never need to know that. Guess what? You need it for the CPA exam. That's where we have to come in and even though you've never seen it, to review it, we'll teach it to you. There's also stuff like maybe governmental accounting that you saw once but don't remember. So we'll cover that as well. There are a lot of times, I know when I was in school, governmental accounting was an elective and I elected not to take it. So I had never seen it until I was preparing for the CPA exam. Now, as far as time strategy, and I alluded to that earlier, where we'll sit down and say, okay, for example, for the FAR exam, you've got 45 minutes for Testlet 1, 45 minutes for Testlet 2, and so forth. And in 30 questions, that's about 1.5 minutes per question. So as you're going through the first time the material, what I say is don't worry about the timing, because this is where you're first being introduced to some of the material. The second and third time through is when you really want to start to consider, okay, how long is this taking me now that I'm understanding the material, to make sure that it allows me enough time to get through it. At the testing center called Prometrics, they'll provide you with, again, an on-screen calculator. And that on-screen calculator you'll see here has addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, a little bonus, a square root key, woo, right? It also has a running tape. What's nice about that is if you're adding up a bunch of questions, a bunch of numbers, you may not remember where you left off. So one of the nice things, it has a tape, you can clear the tape and so forth. They will provide you with headphones or earphones, sound quieting phones. Also, they'll give you kind of a whiteboard. And this whiteboard, what that allows you to do is you can write all over it, turn it over, write all over it again. When it gets full, you raise your hand, you can get a new one and trade it in. So that way, that's your scratch paper. They used to give scratch paper, but they found too many people were folding it up, putting it in their pocket, and whoop, taking it out the door. So they switched from the scratch paper over to this kind of a whiteboard. Now, what is a passing score? Let's see, a passing score is 75 and above. Woohoo! 75 and above, you're a CPA. What's a failing score? 74 and below. What's it mean? I came this close to being a CPA. Thanks for coming out. We have a nice consolation prize. No. So 75. Now in college, if you got a 75, what does a 75 feel like? Like you're not doing very well, like I might not be getting a job, like I'm an average student. That's what C in CPA stands for, right? C, average. So realize that it's not an IQ test. You don't have to be a genius, but you need a little bit about a lot of information. It is like a lake an inch deep and a mile wide. So that's why there's so much material to cover, but we want to make sure you feel comfortable with it to get you through the exam. So again, figure about, as we said here, 75 and above is passing. That's going to take a fair amount of time to prepare for just to accomplish that goal as well. Now, when can I sit for the exam? Back in my day, when I was your age, and I sound like your parents, but back in my day, we could sit twice a year, May and November. So we studied for 4 or 5 months. We had to take all 4 parts at once. We had to pass at least 2 of the 4 parts to keep anything. And if you didn't pass at least 2, you kept nothing. So once you passed, you kept it for the next 6 exams. If not, you lost everything. You had to start all over. Now, you can book it like a doctor's appointment. You can take the exam 8 months a year. In my day, 6 days a year, 3 days in May, 3 days in November. Now, you can take it in January, February. March is a blackout month. January, February, March. April, May, June's a blackout month. So months 3, 6, 9, and 12 are blackout months, no exam. The other 8 months, you could take 1 or 2 or 3 or all 4 parts. So we have students that come in from other countries and take all 4 parts at once. We have students, a lot of students, and we get testimonials all the time. We've got plenty of students who will take all 4 and finish them in 2 or 3 months, for example. So it's kind of up to you. We have other students that stretch it out over 12 months. For example, if I'm graduating and I'm about to get a job at a firm, some of the firms offer a bonus if you pass in the first year. That's exciting. So what does that mean? I'm going to pass in the first year to get that bonus. So therefore, you want to set up a proper study schedule to make sure you allow enough time to get through all 4 parts in that allotted time in order to get that bonus. Now, where do you take the exam? You go to a testing center called Prometrics. And with Prometrics, they're located all over the country, all over the world. That's why the exam has gone global, which is great news for us because once you become a CPA, you're becoming a worldwide CPA. One of the things you'll see too on the exam is they're introducing a lot more international information. IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, that is more heavily, it's about up to 10% on the FAR exam, but you'll notice that that's more international rules. We've got information on auditing, like international auditing standards. There's all the corporate governance, more international. So a lot more international, but one of the things that's nice because Prometrics is international, you can take the exam in Japan, in the Middle East, in South America, in places in Europe. So it just keeps growing and growing, which makes you more and more valuable. With Prometrics, generally the exam is given 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. As far as scheduling, you just go online once you have this thing called a notice to schedule. And I'll talk about the application process in a minute, but once you have that notice to schedule, you can go online, and as I said, you kind of book it like a doctor's appointment. Let's say I want to take it on a specific day, then be flexible on the location. Let's say I want a specific location, then be flexible on the day. They have like, a morning, afternoon, evening, like a fine dining. We have seating for 2 for international, for FAR at table 3, please. So when you show up, it kind of looks like little cubbies, like you'll see here. You've got your headphones, you've got your screen, your computer. You go ahead and log on, boom, and start the exam. You need your copy of the notice to schedule, 2 forms of ID. I always tell people arrive early, right? Anything that can happen will happen, right? The day you're driving, the freeway closes down. There's a big accident. You don't want to be late. You don't want to lose your window. You've got to start over with the application process. So this is important to make sure as far as the Prometric centers that you're properly prepared. Now, what does it take, you ask, to sit for the exam? What do I need to sit? Every state board's a little bit different. The exam itself is the same exam nationally and worldwide. It is on federal information only. For example, with taxes, it's federal tax, not state tax. So federal rules. Business law, we're looking at a majority of jurisdictions. So it's federal, federal, federal. However, each state regulates what it takes to become a CPA in their particular state. Most states, first of all, you need a bachelor's degree. In a lot of states, you need 150 semester or 225 quarter units just to sit. Other states, all you need is 120 units to sit, but maybe 150 units in order to get certified. In order to sit, in most states, you need 24 semester units in accounting, 24 semester units in business. But as I said, you can check our website for the details for each of your individual states. Because each state, as I said, has different requirements, what it takes to sit and what it takes to get certified. Now, how do you apply for the exam? First of all, you go online and basically you're going to fill out the application. It usually costs about $100 to $200 to apply the first time, and in most states it's about a $50 repeat process. Now, in some cases, and there's like 32 plus jurisdictions where NASBA, National Association of State Board of Accountancies, you can apply through them, and it takes about 1 or 2 weeks in order to finish everything up, in order to get your notice to schedule. A lot of the other states, they don't want NASBA to do it for them because they want the revenue for their states, so then you have to go to those individual state boards in order to sign up. All the states or the NASBA would require your transcripts. With your transcripts, generally you have to have a degree complete, and they'll be looking for the 24 semester units in accounting, 24 in business. If it's a state where it's 150 units to sit, they'll be looking for that as well. Then you get this thing called an ATT, an authorization to test. It is good for 90 days. At that point, I've got 90 days to choose which parts I want to sit for in the next 6 to 9 to 12 months, depending on my notice to schedule, how long it is. Each state's a little different. Most states, their notice to schedule is good for 6 months. Some states are 9 months. Some states, there's a couple that are 12 months. That means whatever parts you pay for, you have that long to sit. Now, as far as paying for the parts, they're roughly, let's say, the longer, and it's all based on time. Let's say, for example, since FAR and Audit are longer, they're a little more expensive, let's say close to $200 each. The other shorter ones are about $175 each. So all 4 parts are like $700 to $800 for all 4. But here's the key. You don't have to pay for all 4 if you don't plan to sit for them within the time limit of your notice to schedule. So if my notice to schedule is 6 months, if I don't think I'm going to sit for all 4 in 6 months, go ahead and just pay for 2 or 3. You can always add the extra. And here's the key. When you first apply, it could take anywhere from 2 weeks with NASBA to maybe 6 weeks in your individual state to get your notice to schedule. When you reapply, they already have your transcripts, they've done the background and so forth, so there it takes maybe a week and it's $50. So it's kind of like having that option contract for $50. So I suggest you sign up for maybe 2 or 3 the first time. You can always add the extra. Then you receive your notice to schedule. If you don't sit within that time period, the fees are forfeited. That's why I always tell people, don't necessarily pay for all 4. You can pay for 2 and add more later. But if you sign up for all 4 and you don't sit within, let's say, your 6 months, then hey, I've just given some money to the state, which the state appreciates because they all need money. You have to make sure your name exactly matches your notice to schedule and your ID. So hey, I just got married, I changed my name. Guess what? Make sure everything matches. Then you schedule your exam with Prometrics, and as I said, about 6 days a week. You go in and take the exam, and then you receive your scores. Now, when you receive your scores, generally, and it releases the scores when you take the exam in the window, let's say January. So basically, they'll go about 40 days out, and they'll say, okay, the first 40 days, now we grade them. About 11 days later, they release the scores. And then the same kind of thing, 20 days, and then 6 days later. 20 days, and then 6 days later. So what happens is you'll get your results depending on when you took it. If you took it on January 1st, you may not get your results for 50 days. But if you took the exam towards the end of that, let's say towards the end of January, you could have your results in a week or 2. So that's when they release. They release the scores in 3 basic waves each window. As far as the requirements of licensure, and as I said, some states, and most states, the requirements to sit are different than the requirements to get certified. So what does that mean? In some states, to sit, you only need 120 semester units, but to get certified, you need 150. In other states, you need 150 to sit, 150 to get certified, but you also need some experience, 1 or 2 years, depending on how many units you've had. A lot of the states that require 150 semester or 225 quarter will say just 1 year of experience. Some states that are, for example, 120 units may require you to have 2 years of experience, but again, you can check our website, RogerCPAReview.com, for the specifics, details of your individual states. In order to get certified, you also have to have that experience under the supervision of an active licensed CPA. And a lot of times we get that question a lot. They go, well, what does it take? I need a year of experience. What does it mean? Usually it means, again, working under the supervision of a licensed active CPA. Now, I can feel the excitement and enthusiasm. You're all saying, Raj, I'm excited, I'm motivated, almost as excited as you. Raj, what does it take for me to get through all 4 parts of the exam? Basically, depending on your background, it could be anywhere from 200 to 400 hours of prep time. What does that mean? You'll see, for example, let's take financial accounting and reporting. So financial accounting and reporting is, let's say, about 40 hours of lecture time. So for 40 hours, you're going to walk through the details of IFRS versus US GAAP, talk about accounting standard codifications, go in through the balance sheet, talk about cash, receivables, inventory, fixed assets, and so on. So we go through all that detail. While you're watching, we're going through actual CPA exam multiple choice, actual CPA exam task-based simulations. So that could be, let's say, 40 hours. So you're spending 40 hours watching this lecture. Then you need about 2 to 3 hours of study time for every hour of lecture time. What are you doing in that 2 to 3 hours? You're reading the material. You're then going through actual released AICPA questions and solutions. You're also then going through task-based simulations, and you're working through the questions where you're working through the material, you're working through the software so you're comfortable with it. You're working through the written communication type questions for BEC. You're practicing your research and so on. So you can see here that, let's say the whole course is 120 hours. That means 2 hours is 240 hours of studying. 3 hours is, what did I say, 360 hours of studying. So it is a major, I hate to use the word, commitment of time in order to properly prepare for all 4 parts. So it's important to make sure that when you're getting ready to sit down and prepare, that it is the right time for you as far as allowing enough time. And that's why we'll set up a 3, 6, 9, 12-month schedule for you so you can make sure that, okay, I want to pass all 4 parts in 3 months. That's great. For myself, I remember I graduated college in May. Spent the summer studying, passed the exam, started working in September. Other people will take some parts in between, go travel through Europe, and so on. So it all depends on your schedule, how you want to do it. But the main thing is it's a major commitment of time. You want to make sure you set it up properly. But I want you to walk away realizing this is definitely a doable exam. It is probably one of the most difficult professional exams in the country. But it does take a lot of preparation. Therefore, you've got to make sure that you've set up that schedule in your life. The other thing, too, is realizing that, yes, I just graduated from a great school and I had a great GPA, but there's still stuff you may have never seen in school that, yes, in fact, does show up on the exam. That's why it's so important to make sure it is the right time for you as far as properly preparing for what? The CPA exam.